Sandy?
Time?
Yeah. Well, it didn't start yet, but everybody is muted.
Okay, who's there?
Who's here is here. I don't know.
Nancy Cassette.
You want to look
Her on the left.
It is her. This is her.
Okay, that's her. Who else is here?
See here now. A lot of people. People are not off and whatever. Unbelievable. You're not even embarrassed or ashamed. It's just amazing that you're not.
Mute yourselves, everybody. Mute yourselves. You're being heard.
Okay. Good evening. We'll start momentarily. I think let's just wait for a few more people to be able to log on.
Rabbi Zatz, am I the host so I can share screen?
Nechama Price is on, wanting to know if she's the host.
I'm not sure.
Doesn't look like anyone's the host.
1 second, let me try to figure this out.
I could try to share screen and see if it works. Do you want me to try?
Yeah, try for a second.
She and Rabbi Zatz are sharing the screen.
Did it work?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay. Somehow it worked.
oh, as long as nobody else shares their screen, we should be okay.
Okay, he's sharing the meeting.
Okay, so if I guess everybody else can mute themselves, because if you don't have a host, you probably can't mute other people as well. Then that would just block out any extra noise. And again, we will, looks like the number is still going up, so we'll wait another minute or two.
Good evening, Rabbi Zatz.
Hi, how are you? Thank you, Rabbi Steve, for all your.
Thank God.
Okay.
Good evening, Nechama.
Hey.
Nice to see you.
Okay, I think we should get started.
Sure.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. Nice to see so many faces, even at a distance. I want to thank the Adult Ed Committee for all their, oh, if we need, so I think Rabbi Steve is logged in, CBY Zoom 2 is the host. So I guess if there's an issue later, hopefully we'll have the technological wherewithal to be able to.
Do you think that's an issue, Zatz?
No, I think as long as everybody behaves and nobody tries to share their screen and everybody keeps themselves muted, we should be just fine.
Okay, we can mute all.
As long as we can unmute ourselves.
Yeah, people can unmute themselves.
People,
okay.
I think people can figure out how to mute. Most people here are savvy on Zoom by now. Okay, so again, I want to thank the Adult Ed Committee for all their hard work in general and for arranging this evening as well. I also want to specifically thank our sponsors for this evening, Gila and David Weinstein, in memory of Bela Bas Alexander, Mrs. Bess Hastings, and the learning this evening should be the Eloy Nishmasa. I want to open with an apology that I'm in the middle of parent-teacher conferences. So I have a quick break, which is why I wanted to at least be able to come on and welcome our guest, but I probably will have to be on and off over the course of the evening. So again, I apologize in advance for that. But it's really a very special privilege for us to welcome Professor Nechama Price. I think we were classmates in Azrieli a few go-arounds ago, and she has certainly excelled as a senior lecturer of Bible and Judaic Studies at Stern College, very popular. My niece, I know, takes every one of her classes, and I think my mother comes in as well to the city when things were a little bit more normal. So very, very, very popular. She also runs the GPATS program and is a certified Yoetzet Halacha and really is a sought after speaker. So it's really very special that we have the opportunity to hear from her this evening. And the topic is a fascinating one. Villains of Tanakh, are they really so evil? Focusing specifically on Ishmael and Esav. I think the source sheets were sent out in advance, but it looks like she'll be able to share them as well. So without any further ado, we have a very special kavod to welcome Nechama Price.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Zatz, and thank you to the sponsors. I put in the chat the newest version of the source sheet. I made a few changes from the one that was sent out. So if you want your own copy, I just sent the link, and I'm hoping I will now be able to share screen even with our host being on, okay? So
You're now a host, Nechama.
Host, fantastic. I'm gonna share screen so we can all follow along together. Okay, so everybody see my source sheet?
Yep.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I love the topic that was chosen for tonight. So thank you for whoever chose it. I have been researching, for some reason, I don't know what it says about me, but I have been researching the villains of Tanakh now for a long period of time. I find everybody kind of wants to know about Avram and Yitzhak and Yaakov, but you know what? Shmuel and Esav and Lavan and Lot take up a significant portion of the text. And we really do have a lot to learn, not only from the good guys of the text, but also the people that we call the villains. So I wanted to spend tonight using two of our villains as examples of different ways to look at the villains that we have. And I think one of the ways that we look at villains in Tanakh is very similar to the way they're portrayed, I would say, in movies and on TV. You know, if you think about any movie, before you even know that the villain is the villain, you know that he's the bad guy. And it's because he like a bad guy. He portrays a bad guy. He may have a long pointy nose or beady eyes, or he just has a nasty expression on his face. He's probably ugly. He probably has a temper. You know, there's something about him. He's just a disgusting human being. So you know that you're looking at the villain. And I believe that that is one villains that we have in the Torah as well. Starting here in source number 1, the way it's portrayed to some extent is being evil from the beginning to the end. Is my internet okay? Everybody's hearing me?
You're kind of fading in and out.
Which is weird. I haven't done that in a while. So let me see why. I will move. All right. Tell me if I am. And I don't know. I have not had this issue in a very long time.
At the moment, you're okay.
Baruch Hashem.
She's not fading out.
Say again?
She's not fading out. She was perfect.
Thanks, Mindy. Appreciate it. Okay, so I look at our first source here together with us, the Gemara in Megillah, which kind of gives over this impression. Hu Achashverosh. Why do we have the word Hu Achashverosh? To tell me, Hu Berisho Mitchilaso Vad Sofo. He's evil from the beginning until the end, from the very beginning of the story till the very end of the story. It's the same impression. Hu Esav. Hu Berisho Mitchilaso Vad Sofo. He's evil from the very, very beginning until the very end. So to Datan Vaviram, so to so many more. It's this assumption that there's good guys and bad guys in the Torah, and the bad guys are evil. And the reason why we have these bad guys is so that we can compare them to the good guys and make the good guys look even better. I like to call this contrast characters. We have the person in the text that's the contrast to our good heroes, so that the hero looks even better than they did before. Think about it. Almost everybody has a partner. Cain has a Hevel. Cain, the bad guy, Hevel, the good guy. Yishmael to a Yitzchak, Esav to a Yaakov, Paro to a Moshe, Achashverosh to an Esther, and so on and so forth throughout the entire Torah. It's because in order to really seemingly appreciate the good guy, we have to have the kind of contrast to see what it looks like in the bad version of that person. Who's the evil one that's rejected, so that I truly appreciate the good guy who is the one that is accepted and who is chosen. And that is one way to look at villains within the Psukim. But what I would like to show you is that there's really two very different ways to look at villains. The way I just presented, the way we're taught as small children, the way we believe that we're supposed to look at these villains, and then there is a much more complicated way, a way of looking them as human beings who make mistakes, but are not terrible from the beginning to the end, who actually are a lot more human and gray and somewhere in between the picture that we normally see. And I'd like to do this with two of our characters. I would say two people that we normally look at as for sure as evil villains, and show you that it's not as simple as we might have thought. If you look at Yishmael, who's a character that we have already seen in the Psukim of the Parsha that we have already gone through, we all know his story, right? Really very straightforward. He's born to Abraham. He's the son of Hagar. Abraham is 86 years old when Yishmael is born. And the intention at the time that Yishmael is born is this is the chosen child. This is going to be the child who's going to be the heir to everything that Abraham has, is going to be the heir to the chosen nation and the blessing that Avram has been given. He's given a Brit Milah at the age of 13. And on that day, Avram is told, Ki beYitzchak yikra lechazera. By the way, you're going to have another child. Yishmael is not the chosen child. Yitzchak is. And you know what Avram's immediate reaction is? To fight for Yishmael. This is his chosen child. This is the child he's believed in for 13 years. And he argues back, Lu Yishmael Yechya lefanecha. No, God, it's Yishmael. And God says, too bad, it's Yitzchak. Yitzchak is then born, Yishmael is replaced. And of course, if we look through the psukim, where did Yishmael go wrong? What did Yishmael do? Why is it that he is rejected? We come to one single pasuk here in source number 2. Vatera Sarat ben Hagar ha-Mitzrit asher yalda la'Avraham mitzachik. Sarah sees that this child is doing something. Oh my goodness, how terrible is it? He's mitzachik. Mitzachik, he's joking around, he's fooling around. You're like, what's going on? If all of our children got thrown out when they were playing or fooling around, none of us would have children. What is happening here? This can't be what the word mitzachik means. And therefore Chazal comes and draws a different picture for us. You're right, says Chazal. It can't be that that's all that's going on here. It has to be so much worse, because if it wasn't worse, it doesn't make sense that he would get thrown out of the home. And therefore we have the famous Tosefta that blows this into a huger picture. The evil Yishmael gives us a taste as to why Yishmael deserves to be thrown out of the home. And here in the Tosefta, it tells us 3 different opinions, which I will read with you. Darash Rabbi Akiva comes up with one opinion and says, "Vatera Sarat ben Hagar ha-Mitzrit asher yalda la'Avraham mitzachek." What does this pasuk mean? What did Sarah see? Ein tzchok hamor kan el avodah zarah. He was worshiping Avodah Zarah. Oh, that deserves to get kicked out of the house of Abraham. He was worshiping idols. What happened? She mamish witnessed him serving Avodah Zarah. She watched him do it with her own eyes. And therefore she said, he has to get out of my house. Says Rabbi Elazar, no, that's not the story. Rabbi Elazar ben Nosher of Yossi Aglili Omer, Ein schok hamor kan elagila arayot. Promiscuity. Oh, a terrible, terrible sin. He was doing something promiscuous. He was doing something terrible in the realm of sexuality. What's the story? She mamish washed him going out in the field and raping women. What a terrible thing to do. Rabbi Shmuel, opinion number 3, Omer, Ein lashon schok el shvichas damin. He was a murderer. He was murdering people. What's the story? He was shooting arrows in the air. He was hurting people, and he didn't seem to care. What's the picture the Medrash is putting together for us? 3 averos that we all know, Yahar Val Yavor, the worst of sins that one can do, that you have to die before you do any of these 3 sins. This is obviously why Yishmael is kicked out of the home, because he's doing the ultimate of arrows. He's the ultimate horrible, evil villain. That's who Yishmael is. The Medrash Tanchuma here in source number 3 takes it one step further. It's not just he's a murderer, but he's a potential murderer of someone within the home. Somebody's in danger right now. Yishmael has to be kicked out of the home, because if not, somebody might get killed. What am I referring to? Look at this Medrash Tanchuma, very famous Midrash. Kayin sonei lahevel. Hey, we have these other examples of these evil villains. And what's their story? We have an older child, Kayin, who hates his younger brother, Hevel. And what does he do? V'hargo. He murders him. Shnei Amar, what's our pasuk? We've read this in Parshas Bereishis. Vayakam Kayin lahevel achi ve'argehu. Right? He gets up in the field and he kills his brother. So too, Yishmael, an older brother who's being replaced by his younger brother, Saneli Yitzchak, he hates Yitzchak. Shnei Amar, here's our pasuk. Vatera Sarat ben Hagar mitzvah asher yalda la'Avraham mitzachek. Ein mitzachek ella shebikesh lahargo. It's not that he's a murderer in general. He literally wanted to murder Yitzchak. Yitzchak's life is in danger. One more story, the Esav Sanei Yaakov. Here we go. We have a nice trio. Kayin hates Hevel and kills him. Esav hates Yaakov. We're going to come back to Esav in a few minutes. He says, I'm going to kill my brother. So it must be true. Here we have 3 older brothers that are replaced, right? Kayin, Hashem doesn't accept his korban. accepts Havel's korban. They are uprooted by their younger brother. They hate their younger brother. So what does it lead to? It leads to murder. Says the Medrash Tanchuma, Yishmael was going to murder Yitzchak. That's why Sarah had to get him out of the home. He wasn't just a murderer to people in general. He was going to be a murderer within their own home, just like Rivka has to save Yaakov by sending him away to run away from Esav. Sarah has to save Yitzchak by sending away Yishmael. Here is our picture of the evil Yishmael. And you have to take a step back and say, wait a second, Chazal just can't make him so evil. They can't just make that up. So we have to understand, where does this view within Chazal come from? Why are we making Yishmael so incredibly evil? And of course, we've already given a little bit of an answer, which is the fact that Sarah wants to kick him out. He has to be deserving to be kicked out of a home. He couldn't have done nothing. He must have done something significant. We know that Hashem says to Avram, Shema v'kolah, listen to her, she's right. So again, clearly there must have been something very flawed about Yishmael that God wanted him to be kicked out. But it has to be more than that. What is it from the shoresh of mitzachek is leading to the answers that we just saw within Chazal? Well, actually, Chazal gives us psukim as proof, and I gave it to you here in source number 4. There are places where the shoresh of sachok is actually used for these 3 averos, for the avera of avodah zarah and shvichas damim and gilu arayos. It actually is used in one place in Tanakh for each of those things. If you look at source number 4, when we're talking about the sin of cheta egel, which is clearly avodah zarah, when we are about to do the sin of avodah zarah of cheta egel, vayashev ha'am la'achov v'shasu vayakumu letzachek. There's that shoresh, which certainly does seem to imply avodah zarah. So too, if I look at Bereshis Lamatet, which is the story of Eshet Potiphar, who accuses Yosef of coming to seduce her, of coming to rape her, she uses the words when she's screaming to the people after he runs away from her and leaves his clothing in her hands. Re'u hevilanu ish ivri. Oh my gosh, my husband brought in this guy. Lissachek banu, to rape us, to be with us in a sexual way. Therefore, here's proof that word can be used to mean gilu arayot. And in Shmuel Bet, we also have a very, very horrible story of Avner, who is the general of Shaul, but at this time Shaul is dead. So he's the Avner of his son, he's the general of his son Ishbosheth, and Yoav, who is the general of David, and they are in a fight with each other, and they say, for some reason, one day decide, let's have our soldiers fight with each other, and let's watch them fight, like a little show. And they say, Yakumu nahanarim, let's let the boys, our soldiers, get up, v'yisachaku lefanenu, and they'll fight in front of us. And here it means shvichas damim, they fought to the death in this story. And therefore, we do have precedence that this shoresh can be used for these 3 terrible sins. And therefore, it's not a crazy thing for Chazal to say, clearly, if God decided he needs to be thrown out of the home, the word mitzachek must mean something much, much worse than it seemed to have been implied within the psukim. But I want to add one more reason why we're so harsh on Yishmael and we look at him in such a negative way. Because if you think about Yishmael, one other thing that we know about him, which we spent a lot of time in the psukim understanding a little bit more, is who his mother is, right? Abraham marries Hagar. The reason why here in source number 5, Ulai ibanem imenu, it's Sarah's idea, maybe I'll have a child through her. But when Hagar has this child Yishmael, she does not give Yishmael over to Sarah the way she's supposed to. She holds on to Yishmael for herself. And not only that, as soon as she gets pregnant, Pasuk Daled vatakel gvirta be'eineha, she lowers the status of her mistress in her eyes. And certainly there's a machloket on this pasuk of the Mefarshim. Is it just like Radak says that she doesn't want to be the servant anymore? Or is it like Rashi that Hagar is evil and Hagar makes fun of Sarah and she berates her? I got pregnant so quickly. You're not such a great person, because clearly God didn't want you to get pregnant. And all of us know that that is the most insensitive and terrible thing to say. And therefore, if you look at the story, when Yishmael's being kicked out, it's really not Yishmael who's being kicked out. If you look here in source number 6, when Sarah says to Abraham, Garesh ha'ama hazot, kick out Yishmael, she doesn't say kick out Yishmael. She says, kick out this woman. Oh, and by the way, ve'et bina, and her son too. Why? Ki lo yirash ben ha'mahazo, because I don't want him. Who's him? Her kid to inherit. It's not about Yishmael necessarily. It's about Hagar. Hagar is evil. I want evil Hagar out of my home. And he's connected to her. And therefore, just like she is evil, so too he is evil. And if you look at Pasuk Yud Aleph, Avram is upset about his son. It doesn't seem to imply he's upset about kicking out of Hagar. And one of the things that's pointed out in the Pasuk about Hagar, 3 times that she's from Mitzrayim, 3 times that she is not from the family of Abraham, 3 times that she's an outsider. As the Kli Yakar here in source 6 points out, why does it keep telling us over and over again she's from Mitzrayim? Mitzad shaya ben Hagar hamitzrit holida bedomela kikol hamitzrim shtufei zima. There's a negative quality to all the people that come from Mitzrayim. There's evil values that are coming from there. And therefore, v'toldotehem kiyotze bahem. Anyone who comes from there is going to have those values. So to Hagar, so to Yishmael. And therefore, reading number 1 to Yishmael is starting off his story as evil Yishmael. He's this terrible kid who has bad values, who does terrible things. And therefore, Baruch Hashem, he's replaced by Yitzchak. He has to be replaced because he doesn't deserve to be the father of the chosen nation. Not only is he evil, his mother is evil, and therefore they both need to be kicked out. That is one version to this story. Let's look at the story again, because when I look at that one pasuk that I have of Yishmael, mitzachek, I really start to question, because if you look at source 7, the shorish of schok is used over and over again within the storyline of Avram and Sarah and Yitzchak. And it never, in any of those stories, do we ever say that we're talking about avodah zarah or gilu arayos or shvichos damim. We would never say that about Avram or about Sarah or about Yitzchak. But look at the language here in source number 7. When Avram finds out he's going to have a child, Vayitzchak, there's that word. He starts laughing. He thinks it's funny. He says, I'm 100. Sarah's 90. This seems to be crazy. Sarah finds out she's going to have a baby. Vatischak Sarah. There it is again. I can't believe it. I'm too old. Avram's too old. This makes no sense. And there's a back and forth with the same language. Hashem says, why did Sarah sachaka? Why did she laugh? She denies. Alo sachakti. He says back, no, you did. But the shoresh is over and over and over. And nowhere in any of these places do we think it means anything so terrible. Obviously, it doesn't mean something so terrible because they named their kid based on this shoresh. V'karatat shmo Yitzchak. We're going to call him by this name. And then, of course, when he's born, that's what they do. They call this child Yitzchak. Why? Schok asali elokim. God made it funny. God made a joke. Everyone who hears kol Shema Yitzchak li, everybody's going to laugh. And therefore, when you see the shoresh used over and over again, you start to question that word mitzachek. Mitzachek, how could it mean something so fundamentally different? But not only that, the exact way that it's written, mitzachek, is used in another story, which I gave you here in source number 8. It's the story of Lot. You see, when Lot finds out, because the Malachim come to his house to tell him run away because Sodom is going to be destroyed, he tries to save his family. So he goes to the house of Chatznav. He goes to his son-in-laws who have his daughters living with them, obviously, and says, come on, please, Hashem's going to destroy Sodom. And what happens? Vayihi kemitzachek. Here's that word, be'enei Chatznav. They think he's a joke. They laugh at him. That's what the word means. It means to laugh, to make a joke, to make light of something. And they clearly don't follow Lot, and they end up dying in the destruction of Sodom. And if you look closely, you'll actually find that Mefarshim do translate the story this way. I know it's the way we're always taught how the story is. Yishmael was this terrible, horrible person who murders and does all these terrible things. But if you look at Ibn Ezra, if you look at Radak, more Pshat, Mefarshim, that's exactly how they translate the pasuk. Mitzachek, says Ibn Ezra, ki kain minhag kol nar. He acted like a normal kid. This is what children do. They joke around. They have a good time. Says Radak, Mitzachek ki ilu mal'ig al Yitzchak shenolad mizikenim. He was making fun of Yitzchak. How funny are you? You're born at such an old age to our dad, which is kind of funny because Yishmael was born when he was 86 and Avram was 100 when he had Yitzchak. So, it's kind of funny that Yishmael's like, dad was so old when he had you. It's not like he was so young when he had Yishmael either. But he was joking around. He was fooling around with Yitzchak. The obvious problem with this idea of explaining the word mitzachek this way is you're left with the question that Chazal explained to us, which is, then why do we kick Yishmael out? Why are we kicking him out if all he's doing is acting like a normal kid? Why are we kicking him out if he really didn't do anything wrong? Kicking someone out of the home, shouldn't that be a result of a negative action, of doing something considered wrong. Says the Ramban, you know what? We can look at it in a slightly different way. The Ramban here in source number 10. You know, this is the story, says the Ramban. Look at it closely. He says, I know what Chazal says, but this is what I believe. It was the day that Yitzchak was weaned. They were making a huge party. And she sees Sarah's watching in the corner of his party. Yitzchak's having a big party. And Yishmael's sitting in the corner making fun of Yitzchak at his own party. All of Mishtagot always making fun of Yitzchak's making fun of what a big party they're making for him. I didn't get such a big party. Look closely, remember, and I already said this to you. The pasuk says and describes him as the son of Hagar HaMitzri. It doesn't say Yishmael was laughing. It says the son of Hagar. What is he reminding her of? He's reminding her of Hagar. He's reminding Sarah of the woman who made fun of her. He's reminding her of those times and that agony that Hagar did to him. And she's remembering the rule that a servant is never allowed to laugh at his master. And if he does, he's supposed to be put to death. And here I'm watching, even though they're little kids, Yishmael is already acting like Hagar. Yishmael is mimicking his mom, making fun of his master, Yitzchak. And therefore, we have to get rid of her. Not only that, we have to get rid of him. It's not that he did something that's so evil in this moment, but it's the effect of the future that she saw. He's going to turn into a Hagar. He's going to be someone who's going to sit in the home and make fun of my son. I can't have him there. I don't want his influence in the house. He's not evil at the present moment, but he's someone I don't want around in the presence of my son, treating him the way Hagar treats me. And we also have to remember that in the time of Tanakh, if you didn't want someone to inherit within the home, you kicked them out of the home. This wasn't oh, you're a terrible person necessarily. It's we don't want you to inherit. I gave you an example in Shoftim Perek Yud Aleph, Yiftach, who had a different mother than the rest of his brothers, and they say, Lo tincha b'beit avinu, we don't want you to inherit from our father. So what do? They kick him out of the home. It's a terrible thing, but that seems to be a pattern. Why did the brothers get rid of Yosef from the home? They didn't want Yosef to inherit from their father. They didn't want Yosef to become the head of the household. They had to kick him out of the home. And therefore, maybe we can see a kind of different version of Yishmael. He's not such a negative guy. He's not an evil character, but he's someone who is not chosen and therefore is deserving to not be in the presence of Yitzchak. Yitzchak needs his father's full attention to become the chosen child, to become the head of the chosen nation, and Yishmael had to leave. Now you might say, okay, great. This is a perfect example of Pshat versus Drash. Drash, who makes Yishmael into a sinner, and Pshat, which I look at quite closely, and I see that, hey, in the text, it doesn't fully support looking at Yishmael in such a way. But what I want to show you is that's not even true at all. Because when we say Chazal says X, it's a very hard thing to say because Chazal says many things. Chazal is thousands of people and they have different opinions and they say different things. And normally within Chazal, you can find multiple views on every single character, even the villains, we find multiple views. And I didn't even have to start by looking very far because I returned in source number 11 to the Tosefta that I started with, because I said 3 opinions of the Tosefta, but actually there was a 4th. And the 4th opinion is the opinion of Shimon ben Yochai, and he totally disagrees with the other 3 opinions. And he says as follows, I totally disagree with you that Yishmael is evil. No, he isn't. Yishmael is not evil at all. And he even says, I'll tell you why. V'ani omer chas v'shalom sheyeh bebeito shelo tot tzadikahu. Wait a minute. How could it be that Avram Avinu raises a Rasha? How could it be that Avram Avinu lets a child grow up in his home and he turns into a murderer and he turns into an adulterer? That can't be true. So I can't look at it that way. It has to be more like the Pshat. Ein tzchok morkan el inyan Yerusha. He was laughing, he was joking, he was making fun, like the Pshat of the story. What was he joking about? The Yerusha, the inheritance. And here's the story, says the Tosefta, or Rav Shimon ben Yochai in the Tosefta. Kishenolad Avinu Yitzchak la'Avraham Avinu, hayu hakol smechin. Right? Everybody's very happy for Avraham when Yitzchak is born, and everybody's kind of celebrating. We're at a big party. Ve'omrim nolad ben la'Avram, nolad ben la'Avraham. Everyone's cheering. Finally, after all these years, Avram had a son. Avram had a son. It's amazing. Nochelet ha'olam. He's going to inherit the world. No tel shnei chalakim. He's going to get double portion. This child, he's amazing. Yay, Yitzchak. And Yishmael's sitting in the corner and he starts laughing in his head. But Omer, and he's like, they're all wrong. I need Bechor. I need no tell Shnei Chalakim. They forgot about me. I'm the Bechor of Abraham. I was born first. I'm going to inherit it all. Here we have within the Tosefta a version of the story that sounds much more similar to our Pshat, that sounds much more similar to the less negative, evil villain of Yishmael. But I want to show you that we have a whole bunch more of these midrashim that support this other view of Yishmael. I'll give you a few examples. If you look here in source number 12, we have the story now going back a little bit to when the Malachim visit the house of Abraham in Perek Yud Chet. And the pasuk tells us that Abraham runs and he takes a bakar and he wants to make them a beautiful meal and he's all excited. And what does he do? He asks Sarah to help him out, and he gives vayatenu hanaar vayamaher lasotato. He gives the animal to the na'ar, to the boy, for him to cook it. Right? He needs some help. Abraham doesn't want to cook it all himself. And of course, the pshat says Radak. Who's the pshat? Ela misharet. It's a helper. It's a kid who's in the house. What does Chazal do in this story, which is so interesting? Rashi quotes the Midrash, Zeh Yishmael. It's Yishmael. Who? Why? You know, the entire time, obviously, this is an obvious thought, that Yishmael was living in the house of Avram before the birth of Yitzchak. Avram thought this is the chosen child. So what did he do? He was teaching him mitzvos. So he got him involved. Here, hachnasas orchim. Here's a guest. Get involved. Cook the food. Right? Says Radak. There's a big difference between the pshat and the drash. The pshat is it's a person, whatever. It's a servant in the home. In the midrash, it's Yishmael. But again, it's a beautiful version of Yishmael. It's Avram teaching Yishmael how to be a good person. It's Avram teaching Yishmael how to be a man of mitzvos, how to do hachnasas orchim. If you continue on in the story, now, of course, Yitzchak is born. We move to source 13, which is Breishis Chafbet, which is Akedah Yitzchak. And in that story, it seems very clear Yishmael is not here. Yishmael's been kicked out of the home. Perach Aleph, we kicked him out, right? He's gone, right? He's thrown out permanently, right? That's what we think. Well, says the Psukim, Hashem says, Kachnas, Binchas, Yachidcha, Sharhavta, Yitzchak, very much seeming to imply, take your son, your only son, the one that you love, Yitzchak, implying none of those things apply to Yishmael. This is it. This is your only son. This is the only one you got. The other one you kicked out. He's long gone. You don't have him anymore. So this is the only one that you have. It's Yitzchak. And the pasuk then continues. He takes Yitzchak and he takes again Shnei Na'arim, these two boys. And again, according to the Pshat, who are these two boys? Says Radak. These are just servants, whatever, to help him out along the route. What's our medrash once again? Rashi quotes, who is the boys that are coming with to Akedas Yitzchak? It's Yishmael and it's Eliezer. And again, Radak quotes it in the drash as well. Now, this midrash blows your mind. He kicked him out in Perach Aleph. He's long gone. He's in the desert, far away. What do you mean that he comes back? He comes back to Akedas Yitzchak to be there when Abraham is going to kill Yitzchak. Yishmael is there to see when Yitzchak is the chosen one. And what is happening in this midrash? Why does it seem that according to this midrash, Abraham has not truly let Yishmael go? And if you look at Rashi, he quotes another midrash where this message seems to be coming through. This is not evil Yishmael who's been kicked out permanently, but this is Yishmael who's still around. This is Yishmael who's still in the heart and the mind of Abraham. Abraham loves him. He's a good kid. Abraham hasn't let him go. Listen to this Rashi in source number 14. When Hashem says to Abraham, take your son, your only son, the one you love, it's Yitzchak. It's very repetitive. Says Rashi, you know what? It was a conversation. You're missing the other half of the conversation. Such an interesting midrash here that Rashi is quoting. Because Hashem says to him, take your son. So Amarlo, Abraham says back to him, which one? Shnei banim yeshli. I got two sons, Hashem. Which one do you mean? And this whole story doesn't make sense. What do you mean? One you don't even know where he is. He's in the desert somewhere. Of course, I don't mean that one. Makes it sound like Abraham knows exactly where he is. And Abraham maybe is still kind of nearby and he knows where he's. He's like, which one? Which son should I take? So Hashem says, okay, Amarlo Yechidcha, your only son. And then Abraham says, Amrullah, he says back to him, Zeyachidimo, Zeyachidimo. Which one, Hashem? I don't know what you're talking about. This one is the only one to his mom, Sarah, and this one is the only one to his mom, Hagar. Which kid are you talking about, Hashem? I don't know. So Hashem says, Amarlo Sherahafta, what are you talking about? The one you love. And Avram answers back, Amarlo Shnehem Ani Ohev. What do you mean, Hashem? I love both of them. And you're like thinking in your head, what is happening in this midrash? Maybe I love both of them. I kicked one out. And that's when Hashem has to say, okay, fine, Yitzchak. But clearly what's being implied here in this midrash is a very different picture of the relationship between Avram and Yishmael, which is not that he got kicked permanently out of the home. It's not that Abraham has nothing to do with Yishmael. He's still attached to Yishmael, he still loves Yishmael. It's just that Yitzchak is the chosen child for the chosen nation. But Yishmael is not evil and Yishmael is not rejected to that extent. And if you look at this beautiful, beautiful midrash in source 15 with me, if you've never seen it inside, I would like to read it to you. The relationship between Avram and Yishmael is so incredibly beautiful within this story. And it tells us so much about the second perspective of Yishmael as this non-evil villain. He really is not. Says the Yalkut Shmoni, a beautiful story. Shalach Yishmael v'lakach lo isha mibnot Moab v'asiyah hayashima. So Yishmael continues to get married to another woman. She's from Moab, and her name is Asiyah, which again is interesting to me within this story because originally he marries from Mitzrayim and that kind of rejects Abraham, but marrying Moab, that's from Lot, and therefore he's marrying within the family of Terach, within the family, connecting him back to Abraham. Anyway, so her name is Asiyah. Lachar Gimel Shanim halach Avram lerot et Yishmael. Says the Midrash, Avram used to visit Yishmael. So in 3 years, the time passed and he went to go visit Yishmael. He wanted to see his wife and hang out. And interestingly, you see the issue. He makes a promise to Sarah, I need to visit Yishmael. He's my son and I love him. Don't worry, I won't get off the camel. I won't get off. I won't stay long is basically what he's saying. But obviously he does. He gets there midday. He finds Asiyah, right? He bumps into her, he finds the wife of Yishmael. So Amarla, so he says to her, hey, Yishmael, where's Yishmael? So Amarla, so she says back to him, Halahu v'imo lahavi peiros v'tmarim min hamidbar. He's out, him and his mom are out in the fields and they're collecting fruit and dates and, they'll be back in a bit. Amarle, so Avram says to her, Marla, Tanili mi'at lechem ma'ayim ki ayefa nafshi medarach hamidbar. I'm really tired. You think you could give me some bread? You think you could give me some water? Right? It's mamish the story of the Jewish people who are trying to go through the land of Moab and asking for bread and water. Right? Such a similar storyline. Amarle, so she says back to him, no, I'm sorry. Ainli lo lechem v'lo mayim. I'm sorry, Avram. I don't have any bread. I don't have any water. So he gets pretty disappointed in this wife that his son has chosen. So Amarla, so he says to her, by the way, I'm going to go. But when Yishmael comes home, can you do me a favor? Could you just give him this message from me? But Amrilo, say to him, Chalaf et maftan beitcha. Change the entrance to your home. It's not good enough for you. And it's not worthy of you. It's not deserving of you. Okay, Avram now goes home. Yishmael now comes home. And the wife tells him the story. He's half smart, right? He's got his dad's smarts in him, right? Half of him, right? So he understood Vishalcha. And he divorces his wife. He sends her away. He says, Avram just told me, you're not good enough for me. He gets married to another woman. Same story. He comes to visit 3 years later. He promises Sarah, I promise I won't get off the camel. He gets there midday. He meets the new wife of Yishmael. He asks the same question. I'm very tired. Can you give me something to drink when Yishmael's not home? Right away, right? She has the midah of Abraham, right? She comes and she brings him water, she brings him food. Amar Avram vayam etpalel lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He gets up and he starts davening to Hashem al beno about his son Yishmael. V'nitmalei beito shel Yishmael b'kol tov v'mamon v'brachot. And he's, what a bracha! Everything should be filled with money and brachos and everything. V'kishavay Yishmael hagidu lo es hadavar hazeh. And the wife tells him the story when he gets home. V'yada Yishmael she'alach shav rachmav alav kerachem alav. He realizes his dad really loves him, right? What a beautiful story found in the Midrash. But it's beautiful on both ends. What you see in this Midrash is Avram never let go of his son. He never let go of his son. He went to visit him. He wanted to check up on him. He wanted to make sure that who he was married to was deserving of who he was. Clearly, he felt Yishmael was a good person and therefore was deserving to marry a good person. But what's interesting in this Midrash, Yishmael also respects his father, right? When he gets the message from his dad who says, change your entrance, meaning I don't like your wife, He didn't say, well, I don't care about you, Dad. You kicked me out of the home. Why should I listen to you? What does he go and do? He sends her away and marries a new wife, according to this Chazal. What you have in this midrash is this beautiful relationship between Avram and Yishmael and a very different picture of who Yishmael is. And to finish this off, within Chazal, we have the most weirdest. I give a shir just on this Chazal another time. I'm happy to, if you would like. Source 16, another midrash that comes up that actually is found right after this story in many of the midrashim, which is the idea that the third wife that Avraham has by the name of Keturah, who he marries after Sarah dies, this is really Hagar, as the Medrash's Rashi tells us. She's called Keturah because she's so beautiful in her actions. It's like a Ketoret. But really, what's he doing? He's remarrying Hagar, and he's re-inviting Hagar and Yishmael back into his home. Says Rashi, even it's not even that Avram brings Hagar back into the home, but it's Yitzchak who halach lavi Hagar la'Avram aviv sheyas enu. That's why Yitzchak's in Ber L'chai Roi. He's bringing the family back together. In this picture, it's such a different picture. It's Yishmael who gets kicked out of the home, but is not an evil villain. Is a nice kid. And Avram and Yitzchak bring him and welcome him back into their home. At the end of the story, he remarries Hagar, and Yishmael becomes one of his children living in his home again. And you have to ask, where does this all come from? I mean, this is beautiful storyline, but where does this come from? From within the Pshat, where is the Medrash getting it from? And where they're getting it from is from the very ending of the story of Abraham. If you look at source 17, when Abraham dies, first of all, it tells us he dies b'seiva tova, zakein v'saveya. It's very repetitive in terms of he dies in such a satisfied, beautiful way, seiva tova and saveya. And it must be coming to add something. He's dying in a very happy, peaceful manner. You can only die in a peaceful manner if you have peace from all of your family, you have peace from all of your children, not if one of them is off who knows what. Not only that, Pasuk Tet, the two children come together to bury him. The two of them seem to be, at least in this picture of Chazal, united back together to bury their father. If you look at the Gemara in Baba Batra, the same type of vision is brought down by Ishmael. Ishmael is such tshuva b'chai aviv. He does tshuva during his dad's lifestyle. How do I know? Because he comes back to bury his dad. He comes back. He returns to the life of his father. And the question is, where do you see tshuva here, right? Maybe he comes back just to bury his dad. Where do I see this beautiful ending? Says Rashi, look at the order of the names. Yitzchak's name comes before Yishmael. Yishmael is older. Yishmael is the Bechor, really, and to some extent. Why does Yitzchak's name come first? Says Rashi, Mikansha sa Yishmael tshuva. This is where we see it. V'olich et Yitzchak lefanav. He finally turns it around. Remember the Ramban? He was making fun of Yitzchak. I'm really the older. I'm the Bechor. I'm going to take it all. And Sarah says, we got to get rid of him because I want Yitzchak to inherit it all. Says Yishmael, even if I'm living here, he can have it all. I get it. He's the chosen one. Yitzchak gets to go first. And that's the Seva Tova, because Abraham realizes all of the issues that he had, the reasons he had to kick out Yishmael, all of it has been solved. So beautifully written in the Bereshis Rabbah as well. Source 18, the two of them come together to bury their father. Kan ben ha'amachole kavod ben hagdira. Here you see it. You see it. The servant recognizes the master. Here, what he didn't do in the past is what he does now. Here is the tshuva of Yishmael. And I think it's very beautiful. You know, I know we're all giving Divrei Torahs by Rabbi Sachs lately, and rightfully so. We always should have. His Divrei Torah are incredible. But in one of his books, which is called Not in God's Name, Confronting Religious Violence, he actually takes on this thesis that I'm bringing to you today, which is he really tried to defend the villains of Tanakh. It's a fascinating book to read, and he does it in a number of his other books as well, but that's really the theory behind this book. And he writes, the story beneath the story is that neither Abraham or Yitzchak made their peace with the banishment of the handmaid and the child. As long as Sarah was alive, they could do nothing about it, respecting her feelings as God had commanded Abraham to do. But once Sarah was no longer alive, they could engage in an act of reconciliation. That is how Yitzchak and Ishmael came together to be together when Abraham died. It's a beautiful ending to the story. But as I said to you before, there are many views within Chazal, and this is certainly one of them, a much more positive view of Yishmael, but there certainly is also that negative side, the negative perspective of Yishmael. And even if I want to say why, within Chazal, why was Yishmael back at the Akedah, if we are assuming, of course, he was there, not in the Pshat, but in the Midrash that he was there. If you look at source 19, there's a much more negative perspective within Chazal. Avram was saying, Yishmael, come, He says, stay here with the chamor. Just like the chamor can't see, you can't see. The reason why he brought Yishmael is dafka for it to be like cemented to Yishmael. You are not Yitzchak. Don't ever think you are like Yitzchak. And therefore, that is why Yishmael is there. Yishmael was evil. He's rejected by his father a second time, according to this midrash. But I'd like to bring down a second one that makes him even more evil. If I want to take the line of Yishmael the villain, Yishmael's the terrible person. He wanted to kill his brother. He does all these evil things. Comes the Yalkut Shimoni and says, why does Chazal assume he was back at the Akedah to show us how evil Yishmael was? Amar Yishmael, Achshav Makriv Avraham et Yitzchak beno le'olam mukadet. He found out somehow Avram's going to kill his brother. Here's my opportunity. Here it is. I get to take it all back. Ani beno b'charo v'ani ho yoreshet Avram. Here I go. I now see an opportunity to take it all back, to be able to inherit everything that I lost from Yitzchak, my opportunity to take it all away from him. So too, maybe I could argue he was there to bury his father, just like Esau was there to bury his father. It was either something that was just normal, children come to bury their parents, or again, just like as we'll see, Chazal assume Esau came to bury his father to murder Yaakov. So too, maybe one can argue Yishmael came for the opportunity. Dad is dead. Now I can go and I can attack my brother. I can look at him in that more negative light. And we see that more negative perspective found here. I'm just balancing us out by the Gemara in Shabbos, who says, why is it that Yishmael is so evil? It took a while. It took layers. We had to get rid of these evil layers in order to get to the beautiful Jewish nation. Avram had to get rid of the evil through Yishmael. Yitzchak got rid of the evil through Esav until finally Yaakov was able to have the 12 tribes. Or the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Ein Avram Matzilat Yishmael. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't save Yishmael. Just like no matter how hard Yitzchak tried, he couldn't save Esav. There are two very different perspectives found here in the story of Yishmael. And you might have thought that it was Pshat versus Drash before we began, and that was how I was going to present it. But it's true. In the Pshat, certainly we don't see Yishmael as someone who is evil. We see someone who is joking around. We see someone who is teasing. We see someone who is decided to be undeserving, maybe just because his mother is not Sarah, and therefore he needs to be kicked out of the home. He's kicked out of the home, never to return in the Pshat, except to bury his father, which is a very common thing. People come back to bury their parents, but Yishmael is rejected from the home. That's the Pshat. But within the Midrash, we see two totally opposite pictures of Yishmael. He's evil from the beginning till the end. He's this evil, horrible person. He's a murderer. He's an adulterer. He's this terrible, horrible guy. He must get kicked out. He must witness Yitzchak being chosen. He gets rejected over and over again. He maybe comes back at the end to bury his father, but he is never to be accepted. He is never to do anything that is positive, possibly coming back only to try to murder his own brother. Or is it that there's a change in Yishmael? He was never so evil to begin with within Chazal. He was, he made fun. He wanted to inherit everything. He had to get kicked out. But at some point, he keeps a relationship with his father. He's there with his dad. His dad brings him to the Akedah. He's there the entire time. His dad possibly even reunites the family at the very end. Two opposing views of Yishmael within Chazal itself, two very different ways of looking at this character that we normally label as such a terrible villain. I'd like to move on with Esav before I run out of time, so let us continue along. Esav, we see very clearly, is looked at in this very black and white way as well, very often when we learn the story of Esav. In source 22, I gave you a famous midrash to capture that. Kol avera shakadosh baruch hu soneh haya be'esav. Everything that you could hate, every avera possible, Esav did it. That's how we look at Esav. But you know what? There's tons of ways to look at Esav in every single one of Esav's story. Esav actually has 4 different stories. He has the story of him as a child. He has the story of him losing his bracha. He has the story of him reuniting with his brother. And he has the story where we just hear about his family and his genealogy. And I want to quickly look at all of them. I apologize, I went too long with Yishmael. But if we look at source 23, the very beginning of the story is that 2 brothers are born. And the way that they are described is actually as opposites. Esav is Ish Yodei Atzayid, Ish Sadeh is a man of a field, and Yaakov is Ish
Shlishtam Yoshevo Alim, inside versus outside. Ibn Ezra points out Yaakov Hafach Esav, they're opposites of each other. Their personalities are opposites. That doesn't make one good versus bad. It just means that they're opposites. Says Rashbam, if you look at the Pshat, what were their professions? Source 24. Esav was a hunter, Lasat Sayed. However, what was Yaakov? He was a shepherd. So again, do I look at it as good versus bad, or do I look at it as two different professions of two different people? Says Chizkuni, you could look at it as good versus bad. A hunter is somebody who does trickery, Rama'ut. You have to trick and you have to trap. It is something that is negative. This idea of two professions, one that's more of an outdoorsy and one that's more shepherding, is also found in the parallel of Cain and Hevel, right? We have the Roetzon, the Oved Adamah, the farmer. And again, there we question, are these both positive professions, just different professions, or is one good and one evil? I gave you the Sfarno, right? It's much smarter to be a shepherd, he says. Obviously, the farmer is more negative. But in the case of Yaakov and Esav, one of the major reasons why we think positive versus negative is just by looking at other people who are hunters and other people who are shepherds. If you look at source 26, Nimrod, Yishmael is known to be a hunter as he shoots his keshet, his arrow. And people who are shepherds, which seems to be very positive, is the children of Yaakov, Yaakov himself, Moshe, David. I mean, positive characters seem to be shepherds. And therefore, there's room for us to understand, we start to look at them as good versus evil. Rashi even points out famously, source 27, right, that it's that one wanted to go to do Avodah Zarah already from the beginning. One was in the Beit Midrash. You know, this idea within the Midrash of making Esav so evil. He was a hunter, he tricked his dad, versus Yaakov, who was a Talmud Chacham, sat down to learn evil versus good. But I always start to wonder, is it just two different people with two personalities? It reminds me of Yisachar and Zevulun. Zevulun is b'seitzacha. He goes out. Yisachar bo'alecha. Yisachar is inside. You know, good. It doesn't have to be good versus bad. It's two positive things, as we know from the Midrash, the famous Midrash. Yisachar would sit and learn. Zevulun would go out and bring food into the mouth of Yisachar, which of course parallels the language of Esav putting food into the mouth of his father. The Malbim even writes in source 29 that was the plan of Yitzchak. He saw his two sons, he saw that they were opposites, and he wanted them to have the Yisachar Zevulun relationship. Hitkashrut ben Esav ben Yaakov ki hitkashrut Yisachar v'Zevulun. That was the dream. He wanted Yaakov and Esav to be like Yisachar and Zevulun, which obviously Yisachar and Zevulun came afterwards, so he didn't know that picture. He wanted them to be partners, right? They're both good people. Rabbi Sachs even writes, rabbinic midrash for educational reasons turned Esav into a bad man, but that is not how he is portrayed by the Bible. And if you look at the stories, there's two ways to read every single one of the Esav stories. The first one here in source 30, which I'll summarize, is the story when Esav is exhausted, comes back to the field, and he says, you know, can I have some of that soup, Yaakov, that you're making? And Yaakov says to him, sell me the bechorah and I'll give you the soup. If I want to make Esav evil within this story, I focus on Pasuk Lamed Daled, because what does Esav do? Vayavez Esav ha-bechorah. He degrades the bechorah. He doesn't care about the older child status, and he trades it for a bowl of soup. What a terrible person that he doesn't understand the value of the bechorah. Says Rashi, that's why we see he's a Rasha. Shebiza avodato shalamakom. The Gemara even makes it bigger. He does 5 major averos that day. It's amazing. He deserves to have the bechorah stolen away from him. He raped someone. It's kind of like the midrash we saw about Yishmael. He killed someone. He denied God. He did all these terrible things. I understand. But I'll be truthful to you. If I read this story, I actually feel the pain of Esav. As a parent, you know, when your kid comes home with a really bad trade, you're like, hey, you cheated out my kid. That's not fair, a bowl of soup for the bechorah. If you look at the Kli Yakar here in source 31, that's exactly what the Kli Yakar proposes, which is Yaakov sets him up. He knows that he's going to be tired. He on purpose is sitting there with a bowl of lentil soup, reminding him, because during that time when you're sitting Shiva, you eat lentils. He's kind of saying to him, you know, you're going to die. You're a hunter. You might as well give me the bechorah. He sets him up. Esav is a victim, says the Kli Yakar. He's not the evil one within this story. We move on to the next story in Bereshis Chaf Zayin, where again in this story, Yaakov steals the bracha of Esav. And if you look at the very end of the story, I see evil Esav. He's so mad. He says, when my dad dies, I'm going to kill Yaakov. Ooh, that's evil. That's a terrible thing. But if I look at the psukim, Vayitzak He cries, parallel language to the sincere crying that we have in the story of Purim by Says the Medrash, that's a punishment to us for what we did to Esav. And if you look at the story, he tricked me now 2 times. Dad, give me a bracha. You're crying for Esav by the end of the story. So to do many Mefarshim look at Yaakov in a very critical way. And then we get to the third story. The third story where they finally reunite. And you're looking at the pshat and you're looking for evil Esav and you can't find him. In source 34, Esav comes towards Yaakov. He hugs him. He falls on his neck. He kisses him. They start crying. He says, who are all these people? And they all bow down to him and he introduces him to all his family. He says, you know, you gave me such a great big present. I have too much, my brother. Take it all back. Why don't we travel together? It'll be wonderful. And Yaakov says, I can't. I have little children. So he says, don't worry. I'll leave you some of my men. They can help you. Let's hang out together. It's a beautiful, beautiful reunion. And if you look at Ibn Ezra, he even says it. He wasn't going to harm his brother. He wanted to reunite. It's like the reunion of Yosef and his brothers. But if you look at the Midrash, famous Midrashim, they struggle here in source 35. Did in that moment he really meant it, or was he never meant it? He went to bite his neck. He was trying to hurt him. He was trying to kill him the whole time. He's only crying because his teeth fell out. Rashi says he was saying you could take back the present. I have so much. I'm a Baal Gaiva. I don't need your present. Or source 37, continuing along, Yaakov knew he was in trouble because he fought with that guy earlier who was very questionable who he is. But according to the Midrash, it's the Sar Shel Esav. And he's coming with 400 men, he finds out, says Farno. He knew he was coming to fight. There's a lot of evidence here for evil Esav. He's coming with 400 men. There's a guy who comes and fights with Yaakov. Yaakov is so scared. Yaakov doesn't want to have anything to do with him. But on the other hand, you're like, wait a second, look at the story. It seems so nice. It seems so beautiful. You're kind of confused. But then you have to remember, Esav said, when am I going to kill Yaakov? I'm going to kill him when my dad dies. Well, dad's not dead yet. And we also remember that Rivka said, when your brother is not so mad, I'm going to send for you. She hasn't sent for him. So we're a little bit confused. We're confused about Esav. Is it that he's waiting for the opportunity to kill his brother, which is found here, and I'm going to skip them for time purposes, in source number 40, different versions of Esav trying to kill Yaakov and Yaakov killing him or one of his sons killing him? Or is it that there really is a beautiful ending to this story where Esav is different than the guy that we thought he was? Esav isn't as evil. And the reason why you might want to argue he isn't as evil as we thought is the biggest piece of evidence. Vayahav Yitzchak et Esav. Yitzchak loves Esav. So yeah, the Mefarshim go through hoops that he tricked him and it wasn't real and it wasn't sincere. But the pasuk tells us Yitzchak loves Esav. And the Medrash even tells us when the story of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, I'm such a great guy in terms of kibbud av. But Matzati shekibed Esav le'aviv yoter mimenu. Esav was like the model of kibbud av. Esav really was this incredible person when it came to his father. And we even see it in the psukim even more. Source 42, when Esav sees that his dad is not so happy that he married a woman from Canaan, what does he do here in Pasuk Chet? His dad's kind of disappointed in him. So he goes and he marries a woman from Ishmael. Esav cares about his dad's feelings. Esav cares about if his dad's mad at him. And again, once again, source 43, Esav is there together with Yaakov to bury his dad. Is it he's there with Yaakov to get the opportunity to kill Yaakov, or is he there because he's the guy who's been taking care of his old parents for the whole time that Yaakov's been away? Here's Esav who reunites with Yaakov to bury his parents. And to me, the biggest question of the Esav story is actually hidden in Perek Lamed Vav, because we're not sure what to do with Esav. But then when we get to Perek Lamed Vav, the mystery really seems to unravel a little bit. It's a story that's hidden. We don't normally see it because it's amongst a list of genealogy. But within that list, in source 44, there's a story. Esav goes and takes his wives and his children, and he leaves. He leaves Eretz Yisrael. He leaves his father's home. Vayelech al Eretz mipnei Yaakov achiv. Why? He had too much stuff to stay together, and therefore they couldn't live together, so he goes to live in Har Seir. If I want to see evil Esav, I'll parallel that language to Avram and Lot. Avram and Lot, lo nasau tamar l'shav, right? Same language. They couldn't live together. You see, it's almost the same words. And therefore I can, like Rav Hirsch says, it's a spiritual, it's a moral gulf between them. Esav couldn't live with Yaakov. He couldn't handle living with Yaakov. But then there are these other Mefarshim. And these other Mefarshim that are so beautiful to Esav. And it's so interesting how many Mefarshim really try to defend Esav. If you look at the Bechor Shor in source 46, why does Esav leave? Because he knows the bracha was given to Yaakov. Yaakov gets the land. I'm not going to stay. This isn't my land. I'm going to leave. Does that sound like a villain? A villain tries to steal it back. A villain tries to grab it away from him. No, says Esav. Dad gave you the bracha. This land is yours. Shadal, and you should read it in your own time. It's so incredibly beautiful. Shadal's thesis goes as follows. When Yaakov said the trade of the soup to the Bechorah, what Yaakov didn't mean is I'll be the oldest, because that's stupid, says Shadal. He's not the oldest. You can't buy that. And also, if it was about trading the older status to get the bracha from Yitzchak, then they should have told Yitzchak about the trade. Clearly, it had nothing to do with the bracha. But what it was saying is that when dad is old, I want the house. I want Eretz Yisrael, and I want you to leave. And says Shadal, that was the deal they made that day with the lentil soup. And Esav says, you're right, Yaakov. You're always home. You're always taking care of everything. You deserve the house. I don't deserve it. And therefore, what's the end of the story? Hine Esav kayam shvuato. Esav does his promise. He walks away. He goes to a new land, leaving the land to Yaakov. Does that sound like an evil villain? At the end of every evil villain I know, they say, I don't care that I promised, and they go and they do the opposite. But this is the ending of the Esav story. I promised I would leave. So here I go and I leave. If I take these two villains, it's so confusing, but it's also so beautiful at the same time. There's so many parallels between them. They're both rejected children. They both have kind of this more outdoorsy, huntery type of profession. They both marry outside the family. They both come back to bury their fathers. They both have a listing of generations within the psukim. We care about their children and their grandchildren and what becomes of them. And they're both given a piece of land. They're given a piece of land that we are not allowed to take away from them. We are told, leave Esav alone as we're traveling through the desert to get to Eretz Yisrael. They get to keep their piece of land. They, to some extent, are given a blessing by God. And I can't end without reading this beautiful piece by Rabbi Sachs of understanding this other way of looking at Ishmael and Esav. Sibling rivalry, he writes, is defeated the moment we discover that we are loved by God for what we are, not for what someone else is. We each have our own blessing. Brothers need not conflict. Sibling rivalry is not a fate, but a tragic error. The choice of Yaakov does not mean the rejection of Esav. Esav is not chosen, but neither is he rejected. He too will have his blessing, his heritage, his land. He too will have children who become kings, who will rule and not be ruled. Not accidentally are our sympathies drawn to him, as if to say, not all are chosen for the rigors and spiritual and existential of the Abrahamic covenant, but each has his or her place in the scheme of things. Each has his or her virtues, talents, gifts. Each is precious in the eyes of God. I think if we take a step back and look at the stories of Ishmael and Esav, we have two very different versions of their stories. And this is true, I would say, for all villains in Tanakh, which is we could look at them as black and white. We could look at them as these are the villains of the story. We have the good guys, we have the bad guys. We have the bad guys in order to really see what I'm not supposed to be versus what I'm supposed to be. It's simple messaging. This is good. This is evil. This is who I should be. This is who I shouldn't be. And that's the message of the villains of Torah. And I think that's why it's taught this way to our children. It's simple messaging. But as we get older and we look at the psukim again and we see the complication, we see the grayness, we see the issues that come through the text, I think we learn a much more powerful message. Because you see, if God only wanted us to learn from good guys, then there would have been a Torah that really doesn't really start and really give so many details about the bad guys. We don't start with Abraham, we start with Terach, and we hear about Haran, and we hear about Nahor, because everybody matters within the text. We care about Ishmael, we care about Esav, we care about all the nations that come from Abraham. It's to teach us that there's something to learn from everyone. We can look Kibarav from Esav. We can learn about Shuva from Ishmael. We can learn about the complication of people and relationships from learning about the villains. And therefore I say when we look at Ishmael, when we look at Esav, we should look at them as human beings, like we should look at every other person we know. We don't know people who are villains and good guys. We know everybody. Everybody's complicated. Everybody has good
and bad to them. And I think that's what we're supposed to look at Esav and Ishmael. Just like God felt that there was something to learn about Ishmael and Esav, which is why they deserve to have psukim about them within the psukim and stories and hear about their children, and they deserved pieces of land. So too, we should look at everybody in that same light as complicated, and therefore there's good and there's bad in every single person. And there certainly is what to learn from every single person, even someone like Esav and Ishmael. I apologize, I'm 2 minutes over. I will stop share. I know I was supposed to leave time for questions. I'm happy to take any now if anybody still would like to remain on, but thank you everyone. And thank you for inviting me to speak with you tonight. It's always a pleasure to share Torah with you. If anybody has questions, please take themselves off mute. And for those who want to leave, have a wonderful night.
If you have a question, speak up as long as nobody else is speaking.
Oh, I
ahead,
do have,
Mindy.
okay, so it's not a question, it's a comment that actually made to Rebbitzin Weil that I noticed. So with Esav, with Esav, the whole idea of kibbud of aim, that whole thing, I said that I think his downfall was that even though he had that kibbud of the aim for his parents, so he understood what that was, he didn't have that kibbud of the aim for Hashem. He didn't, for an Av, that's supposed to be really the higher Av. That if you look at the, she really added to this, if you look at the Luchot, why, they always ask, why is kibbud of the aim with Hashem rather than between man and man? So the whole idea that his downfall was that he knew he had a respect for his father, but he didn't carry that over to the main of respect and believing emunah in Hashem. And that whole thing, and the whole thing with being on which side of the luchot, because they were supposed to be, we're supposed to act to our parents like we're supposed to act to Hashem, and from that get to how we act to our parents. That makes sense? You said?
Thank you. Very beautiful. Thank you very much.
So it's Ira Jaskell. So I have a question. Nechama, can you see me? Hi. So this is a question that I had Nobel Prize winner Professor Alman spoke on this topic a number of years ago. It's the Rosh Yeshivas at YU, and his specialties on game theory. So when he spoke about the issue of the following question came up: how is it possible that in the house of Avraham that Yishmael could be Mesachik? And as with Mesachik that he's doing how is it possible, right? That it's impossible that he could have done these three things. I mean, it's just impossible. So, and his theory was that why did Sarah send him? It had to do with inheritance. That's why she sent them out. It had to do with inheritance, and which in his mind is, game theory is about inheritance. That was his theory, right? That she wanted to send out Yishmael because she didn't want Yishmael and Hagar to be there once Yitzchak is born. And that was his theory. Comes Rabbi Chalab, who was then the head of Beretz, and Rabbi Newberg, his father-in-law, and he says, I have a Tosefta in Yevamos that proves this. You got to find it. There's a Tosefta in Yevamos that actually quoted this specifically. You brought down a Tosefta from, where is your Tosefta? In whatever you had it. You had a Tosefta, right? Right. Sota. This is Tosefta. I think Amos Pesach was in Amos, and specifically quotes that the reason why it was amazing.
Yeah.
The reason, right?
And the Tosefta quoted. That's the opinion of Shimon ben Yochai.
Right.
100%. Can't be. He's brought up by Avram. Can't be.
Can't be. And it was because of inheritance.
Yeah.
Yerusha. It was Yerusha. And exactly the reason that Professor Alman said, and it was because of the competition of game theory.
Right.
Within that. So
game theory. Right. I like that.
Right. So which was amazing, how it fits into his theory within that. It was unbelievable within that. But so you see it again from the point of view of that. And I think the other point of view, which we say from why is do we say Yishmael did tshuva? Because we have Rabbi Yishmael, which you didn't mention, right? How can one of our great Talmidim be called? No one else is because he's Rabbi Yishmael. It's another source.
Right.
Okay.
That's an interesting one. Okay. You're right.
Thank you.
It's another interesting one.
Name our children Yishmael. That's true. But
Right.
good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Theon has his hand up. I think that's
Go ahead.
Hi.
So the three sources that you quote, two of them do apply, but the third one has no tzaddik, has the shin. That's not the shoresh for the resah. Where do they come for the resah? Yakumu anarim v'sahaku lefanenu. It is with the shin.
Agreed.
Not even shin smalit.
Right. Agreed.
How do they play with it?
Right. It's a good question on the Tosefta. I didn't make that up. That was in the Tosefta, which I said. So it's a good shaila on the Tosefta. But you do find often that there are shorashim that like a letter changes and we assume it's the same shoresh. But I agree with you. It's a very good shaila on the Tosefta that quotes that as its proof.
Even by the Sforim, many times say instead of tzaddik, sadik, it goes to samech. The shin smalit, not samech.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you. Even though v'sachaku lefanenu, how else would you? I mean, it means murder each other, but I'm saying even in that context, I think the translation is normally assumed to be they play in front of us. So it really does have the same implication, but your question is still a valid question on the Tosefta.
And to make it strong, sahuk asali Elohim. There, I think it's not with tzaddik also. It's with shin. So he's a contradicting shoresh.
Right. No. In all the other places, it's a tzaddik. You're right. That's the only place where it's with a sit. You're correct, 100%. Anybody else? I saw somebody else's hand.
Yeah, I have something. First, I want to congratulate you. It was very interesting. My only complaint was that it wasn't long enough.
Oh.
It was very good. I had one comment or question. I liked how you brought in varying opinions on many of the points that you raised. And you mentioned something about Keturah, and that welcome her back as Hagar was one of these pivotal points in both Abraham and Yitzchak reuniting the family, which is very nice. But my question has always been bothering me. Another thing that always bothered me was I agree, like Esau never seemed that evil to me. And I always had to try to get all roused up, like, okay, why was he so evil? But you get plenty of proof for that if you want. But anyway, back to my main question.
Yeah.
And I said how you raised, both opinions, but on Keturah being Hagar, it's always kind of bothered me that, why don't they just say Hagar? And now, are there any varying chazal on whether she was actually Hagar or not Hagar?
So as I said quickly, I actually give an entire shir just on this midrash because it's a crazy one. Understand the pshat is it's not Hagar, it's Keturah.
Right, Keturah. Incense.
100%. This is totally not Hagar within the psukim. There's one idea within Chazal, which is brought down by Rashi, which is why it's such a popular view, that's really Hagar. But it brings down a massive question, right? Because the negative character who we got rid of, and now we're calling her Keturah, and she's so nice and she's so sweet. And it doesn't seem to make any sense at all to call her Keturah at this point in the story, and to welcome her back in is really quite far-fetched. So I'm with you that it's sweet and it's nice, but you really have to understand what Chazal is doing there. And I can give you my shir right now if you want, but I'm saying in very short, I think that there's two aspects to that midrash. Number one, Chazal does have something called conservation of personalities as a method that they use. When we have someone, we don't know who they are, we try to label them as somebody else, like Shipra and Pua, oh, that's Miriam and Yocheved, or, Lapido, or his husband, it must be Barak. We have that all over the place. But this one is different because even though we're like, oh, one wife of Avram seemingly is the other wife of Avram, and we're making it simple, you're making someone who's evil into someone who's positive. So it's a very difficult conservation of personality. And the question is it coming to, and I believe it's coming to enlighten us about Keturah. And it makes us look at Keturah again. So just like I looked tonight at Ishmael and Esav to make them not so evil, I think that midrash is coming to tell us, don't think Hagar is as evil as we thought. And you actually have to go back to the story of Hagar and see her as a very different character. And maybe Chazal was assuming she wasn't so negative the whole time. But 100%, by the way, the pshat is that it's a new person by the name of Keturah. It's really just one view that we would say Keturah is Hagar. Is that clear? I mean, I can answer it in longer, but I think you might want to.
I appreciate your answer.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure if it was the same person because, you know, in the pshat, I don't see much evidence for it.
I don't think we think it is. Pshat is it's certainly not the same person. I think Chazal is saying it is to teach us a lesson. And then the question is, what lesson is Chazal coming to teach us? And that, you know, has many different answers to that question. But within the Psukim, there's no reason to believe that when he marries his third wife, it's Hagar. That's for sure true.
The only thing is,
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
isn't Kasura, isn't the incense, so don't we, when we daven, we say the whole thing that a bad smell comes into it also, a bad spice, so that we are all together and affected, and that her name could be Keturah. Does that mean,
Incense,
is that the same thing as the incense, that maybe the bad mixed in with the good and how it changed her?
I mean, the idea that Hagar is Keturah is kind of, there's a change in Hagar to make her positive. But at the end of the day, we wouldn't call that the pshat of the text. It's a beautiful midrash that's coming to teach us messaging, you know, and it fits very much in line with Yishmael being a more positive figure. That's all I was bringing it up as, not as I certainly don't believe that Hagar was Keturah. I think it's a nice idea, but I don't think that it would be the way we would look at the pshat of the text. Sion, you want to add something very badly?
Yeah, but we see that during that Shinui Shem brings Shinui totally. Right. Avraham, Sarai, Sarah, Yaakov, yes. Israel, right? So we see Hagar and Keturah because there is a change of character from what we already know. Because the midrash that you quote about Keturah, beside Ma'asim, also the same. Keturah is also in Aramaic is likshor, so she refrained from being with other person, thinking that she might go back to Abraham Avinu. Right. Therefore, she changed her ishiyut, or her personality. The same thing like every change of a name in the Chumash create change letovah.
100%.
We don't see that in Ishmael, but we saw that in everybody else.
Okay. If you assume it that she is Keturah, then yes, it would fall in line with the changing of names. Okay. Yes, Harold, you want to speak, please? Unmute.
I think we have time for one more question.
Oh,
anybody?
Harold is trying to speak. Harold Pearl.
He's
we
muted.
Can't hear you. You're not muted, so I don't know why we can't hear you.
Tell him to test microphone.
You have to read lips.
No, go near where it says mute. There's a little arrow. Press on it and test his microphone and see if it's on. Tell him to test his microphone.
I hear you. Okay.
Oh, there you go. We hear you.
Yeah.
We hear you.
Got it.
Okay. Can you
need to start over
on the interaction between Yaakov and Esau that I find very disturbing from Yaakov's perspective? Here is Yaakov, the grandson of Abraham, who, as far as being treating strangers, he sees he's on his post-operative bed. He's ill, Abraham now. He sees strangers coming in the distance from the desert, and he jumps up, welcomes them into his tent, asks them, "Can I give you water, food? What can I give you?" Right? Sends Sarah to provide them with everything. Now you have Yaakov, who has Hachnasas Orchim, right? Now you have Yaakov sitting in his tent, and here is his brother, who comes in from the field, desperately dying, totally exhausted. He doesn't even look up at him, does not offer him anything, waits for Esau to say, "Please give me something." And his response is, "Well, what's in it for me? Okay, how much do you want to pay for it?" That interaction is so mind-boggling to me. I cannot understand that. Who is the evil one there?
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. And I think that one of the issues of making the villains look better is you then make the good guys look worse. And especially when it comes to Yaakov, he ends up not looking so great. And a lot of the Mefarshim are very critical of him in that story. And when he steals the bracha and lies and says he's Esau, very critical of Yaakov. And many of them say his punishment is that he has to go to the house of Lavan and change his ways and learn from that and come back a different person. Rabbi Sachs even writes, he changes from Yaakov to Yisrael. Like, he needs to change it from the guy of trickery to actually the person deserving of the bracha.
All right. The trickery part you could blame Rivka for, because Rivka says it's on me.
Yeah.
So he's just carrying out what he was told to do. But
Right.
that first encounter, that's all him. I'm sorry.
With you. I'm 100% with you. I love how you said that, the opposite of Abraham. Thank you very much. That was very,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I would like to thank Nechama Price for a fascinating and really very illuminating lecture, providing new ways for, I think, many of us to look at Esav and Yishmael. So thank you very much. Thank you, Nechama.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. So great, as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you
Excellent.
very much.
Thank you.
Have a great
Very
night.
good. Very good. Thank you. Come back.
Invite me back. I'll be there. Bye. Have a good night, everyone.